Hey y'all, this is Teresa.
And Mark.
And we're your hosts for
Tell Me That Story,
where we'll tell y'all true stories of real life happenings.
So stick around. You never know what you might hear.
Hey Mark, how are you?
I'm good. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Well, you know, I was telling y'all a while back that we were going to talk about several different things. We were going to talk about some inspirational things and some funny things and maybe even get into some weird stuff. Well, we're about to get neck deep in the weird today.
Neck deep in the weird.
Neck deep in the weird.
Oh, yeah. My goodness, I'm excited.
You know, I told you before that there were some stories that I was hesitant to tell. Well, this is one of them.
He has found his brave moment today, so y'all hang on.
Yeah, this is one of those stories that I don't tell a lot of people because really, if anybody had told me this other than the person that told me, I probably would not believe it.
Yeah.
Because it's so weird and so strange. But this is a story that my grandmother told. This is not something that actually happened to me. My grandmother told me this story about something that happened to her when she was a little girl. So let's back up a little bit. I want to give you a little bit of background about my grandmother. She was probably one of the most godly women I've ever known. She was old school, Pentecostal. I've said a lot of times if she thought there was one bone in her body that wasn't Pentecostal, she would go and have it removed. Because, you know, that's just the way she was. Long hair, long dresses, was all business. You know, she didn't believe in making up stories. As a matter of fact,
She didn't even believe in joking, did she?
No, my dad was a big joker.
Oh,
he loved
yeah.
to tell jokes.
Oh, I didn't realize you were going to even say that.
Yeah, and she used to tell him that, you know, you don't need to do that because anything you tell that's not true is a lie.
Yeah.
And he would say, well, it's just a joke. She said, it don't matter. It's not true. It means it's a lie. So, you know, she was not one to make up stories, but she told me this story when I was little.
And hey, even before that, Mark, talking about when you were little, you know, and I don't know if you've ever even told the people that you were adopted.
Yes.
You were adopted. How old were you?
I was 13 days old.
Yeah. And I think you were something very, very special in her heart.
Well, my grandmother lived with us.
Yeah.
Well, she didn't actually live with us. She lived next door, but she stayed at our house at night. She was scared to stay by herself.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know if something had happened, but she just wouldn't stay by herself. Mm-hmm. Ever since my grandpa died, she wouldn't stay alone at night. In the morning, she'd get up and she'd go home.
Yeah. But
she spent the night with us every night, and she slept in the same room with me until I was like 12 years old, until it got to be weird, you know. And when I think she passed away when I was 14, I think. But she told me this story when I was about 8 years old.
Yeah.
And then in later years, I was probably 12 or 13 years old. I asked her about it, and she told me again. The story never left my mind, and I remembered it in detail.
I know, and you told me after we started dating and everything, and I remember you've talked about it several times over the years. I'm so excited that you're actually going to share it with the people today.
Ever since she told me this story, I've had a fascination with unexplained.
Supernatural.
You know,
it's supernatural.
And people say, well, it's okay for it to be a mystery. Not to me. I want to know. What is it? What caused it? You know, I've got that kind of mind. You know, that stuff, it's always intrigued me.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I'll get into the story. When she was a little girl, they lived in an old house on a hill in the back of a big hayfield and a cow pasture. They had cows out there. And this was back before automobiles. If there was automobiles around, they couldn't afford one.
Right.
So they still had horses and buggies. And there was a wagon trail that led from the main road to the front of the house.
Uh-huh.
And there was a gate. They had a gate up and had a fence around the property to keep the cows in. And she said they were sitting on the porch late one evening, right before dark, and they see what they thought was somebody walking down the path from the road.
Who is they, Mark?
It was my grandmother and her little brother, which was just a baby, and a toddler, and her parents, which would be my great-grandparents. And at the time, her grandmother, my grandmother's grandmother, was on her deathbed, and she was staying with them, and she was in one of the bedrooms.
Okay.
She was bedridden. And they saw what they thought was somebody carrying a lantern coming down the path from the road to the house. They said it was moving really slow, about 3 feet off the ground, and they were wondering, well, who could that be, you know? And the closer it got to the house, the more they realized there was nobody there. It was just a light.
Oh, really?
Just a ball of light. She described it about the size of a basketball. I remember her holding her hand and showing me about the size of a basketball, and she said it was about 3 feet off the ground and moving really slow. And she said she got really scared.
Yeah.
And started crying.
I think I would too.
Yeah, she started crying, and her dad grabbed her by the hand and said, "Don't be afraid. It's not going to hurt you. Just pray."
And what made him think?
I don't know.
Was that normal? I mean, what made him think it's not going to hurt you?
You know, I think...
How do you know? How do you know it's not going to hurt you?
I think back in those days, things were more common. I don't know. I've heard stories of people from back in that era telling about things like this. I don't know if maybe people were more open to it. I don't know. But anyway, this light was coming down the path, and it got right up to the house, and it came up the steps, went across the porch, went through the screen door and down the hall to where the grandmother's bedroom was, and went through the door. The door was closed, but she said it went through the door and into the grandmother's bedroom.
Yeah.
So...
Okay, creepy light coming into the bedroom.
Yeah.
That's a little creepy.
Really creepy. So my grandmother's father, which would have been my great-grandfather, he got up and went and opened the door and looked inside. And if you've ever seen these old antique bed frames, they were just a metal frame that sits up a couple of feet off the floor. All those beds were high back then. I don't know if they were scared of rats going to get in the bed with them or what, but they made their beds really high off the floor.
Yeah. And
he said that light was hovering underneath the bed. He just closed the door and left it. Well, the next morning...
Well, that's a little weird. You know, like, I'm just going to tell you right now, let's just stop right here for a second. If you see a light hovering under my bed, just, I just need to tell everybody, wake me up, help me get out of there. Don't just shut the door and leave me by myself. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. But he closed the door, and the next morning they went to check on her, and she had died during the night, and the light was gone.
Oh, well, hello there again. What I just say, don't leave me.
Right. So going back to what you were saying, I can't help but wonder if he had seen something like that before, or at least heard of something like that before.
Knew of it, yeah.
To say it's not going to bother you, just pray.
And how does he know? How did he know that it wasn't going to, was he expecting something like that? Was the grandmother, she was not doing well? Were they expecting that?
She was not doing well. They weren't expecting her to live. She was on her deathbed, So fast forward a couple of weeks, the way I understood it was maybe a couple of weeks later, my grandmother and her older brother, which was not at home at the time this happened. I don't think he lived there anymore. But they were coming home from somewhere in the wagon right at dark, and they got to the gate to open the gate to go to the house, and there was a cow in the pasture that had been trying to have a calf and was having some trouble having this calf, having complications. And this light was hovering above this cow.
So they pull up in the wagon and they see this cow out there in the pasture. They see this light above it.
The light is hovering above this cow.
Well, do you know if it was the same size light as...
From the way she talked, yes.
Okay.
But she said the horses that were pulling the buggy, they went berserk. They couldn't even go in through that gate. They had to go around and come in the back side of the property. So the horses didn't want anything to do with it. They were scared to death of it, which I would have been too.
Well, hello.
I can understand. But the next morning, sometime during the night, the cow had the calf. But the next morning, the cow and the calf were both dead.
The cow and the calf were both dead?
Yep. And as far as I know, they never saw the light again.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so the light comes and...
I told you we were going to get neck deep and weird.
Yeah, and then, so why do you think that happened?
I don't know.
What do you think that was?
I don't know.
Was it a death angel?
Maybe, but why would it be interested in a cow?
That's what I want to know. If you were going to say yeah, I'm going to be like, why? Why would it be?
And why were they allowed to see it?
Yeah.
I talked to one of my pastors. We had a pastor's wife for several years that was and God rest her soul, she's gone on to be with the Lord now, but she was very wise.
Yeah.
And I talked to her about this, and she said, the only thing I can think of was maybe it was a death angel.
But why the cow?
The cow. I mean, a cow's one of God's creatures. Maybe.
Was that something to do with confirmation to let them know that when they see that, that's what that is?
Maybe so.
I mean, does that sound crazy?
No, not really. It's just one of those things I've always wondered about, what was it? What could it have been?
Yeah.
So fast forward to, and I'm not really sure of the year. It was before Hurricane Katrina. I'm going to say around 2003, 2004, because it was right before Katrina hit.
And that was 2005.
Yeah.
I think I know what you're fixing to say, and I'm going to say that was probably 2004, maybe.
Yeah, it was close.
A few months before.
Yeah. I was working at a factory in Brookhaven, Mississippi, and I had to drive. My drive home went right past the road that my dad lived on. And I worked the evening shift. I got off at 11 o'clock. I was on my way home one night. It was about 11:15, 11:20, and my phone rang, and I looked down. It was him. He never called me that late, ever.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, something must be wrong. Well, I answered the phone, and he said, hey, where you at? And I told him. He said, come by your uncle's house. I want you to see something. And I said, see what? He said, just come by here. I'll show you. So by the time I got there, he said, well, you're too late. It's gone. I said, what are you talking about? So my uncle's house, the road that he lives on is built on the top of a ridge.
Yeah.
And his house sits up on a hill, and across the road, there's a embankment that drops down, and there's a big flat bottom down there, like a big creek bottom. And they had cut the timber down there. We deer hunted in there, so I knew the land well. It was completely flat. It had a little creek that ran through it. They had cut all the timber in there and replanted it in pine trees. And these pine trees were probably 15, 20 feet tall.
Yeah.
And just choke full of briars and hedges. And I've been through there. It's awful trying to get through it. So I said, what were you talking about? He said, we've been sitting here watching a light down there over the top of those pine trees. Mm-hmm. I said, what kind of light? Was it a person? He said, no. He said, there's no way a person could move through that thick stuff the way this thing was moving. He said it was just moving randomly right above the top of these trees. And he said it finally went out of sight and went into the woods and just kind of disappeared into the woods and was gone. So, I know my dad.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you're messing with me. Because he was a practical joker. He loved to make jokes.
Right, absolutely.
But the very next night, I was on my way home, and he called me again. He said, that light is back. I said, man, you're messing with me. He said, I promise you I'm not. So I went over there, and of course, by the time I got there, it was gone. I didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
But it was the same thing. It was just moving randomly across the top of these trees in this clear cut, and finally made its way to the wood line and went about the same area where it had gone the night before and just disappeared into the woods. And that was pretty much it. They didn't see it anymore.
That's crazy.
Until about, I want to say a month, maybe 2 months later, my uncle's brother-in-law lived across the street, not directly across the street, but about 100 yards down across the street. And he had cancer, but it was in remission. He was doing good. He was doing good. He had gotten good reports. Well, about 2 o'clock one morning, he woke up to his room being just flooded with light.
Yeah.
He said it was so bright. And he looked at the window, and he saw what looked like somebody shining a spotlight in his window. So he jumped up, grabbed his shotgun, and goes out the front door and looks down the wall where his window is, and this ball of light is sitting at his window.
Uh-huh.
And he said it was almost like it saw me, because when I saw it, it slowly dropped down to the ground and went out through the woods and disappeared. And a week later, he died.
Wow.
Yeah. His cancer came back, or he had something they had missed or something, and when it hit him, it killed him quick, and he was gone.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah. Now, did the light have anything to do with him dying? I don't know. But it makes you wonder.
I know, because, what does light normally symbolize? You
naturally think angel, but the Bible also says that, what does it say, that Satan appears
as an angel
of light.
Something like that.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand it. Maybe somebody out there knows more about this than I do. Now, I've heard a lot of people talk about seeing these lights. Of course, nowadays they call them orbs. They don't call them lights because orbs sounds better. But I've heard a lot of people talk about them, and there are a lot of different opinions on them. Some people think there's something demonic. Some people think they're angelic. Some people think they're UFOs. But everybody seems to have the same thought that they're something spiritual.
Yeah.
It's not just...
This is kind of on that same order, not seeing lights or anything like that. But, you and I both used to work at a long-term care facility. And I remember, and this is just coming to me now, so I remember going and the nurses and stuff talking about, the things that they have experienced there. There's, a lot of things that happen there. There's death and things. And when they could know when they were going to go into somebody's room, they would know they either felt something very good or very, very bad.
Yeah.
They weren't talking a whole lot about seeing lights or anything like that. And maybe they did. But it does make me think about that. And it makes me think about a story. It's not about the lights, but I think it kind of coincides along with that. It is something that you don't understand. But I didn't see anything, but I ended up going into this lady's room, and she was a very godly lady. In fact, her name was Elizabeth. I went into her room, and she was laying there, and she couldn't move herself at all. And I guess you'd say kind of just crippled up, And I was standing there, and I felt something that just enormous, like if I could describe it to you, it would be like an enormous butterfly or... it was like wings like that. So I knew that it was an angel that came down and was there on that bed that was right beside me. And then there was another time that I was in her room, and she was looking at me. I had just sang a song to her. It was a little old chorus, and it was just saying, "Peace, peace, wonderful peace."
Yeah.
Coming down from the Father above. And anyhow, I remember that she was looking at me. She would look at me, and then she would look right directly beside me, and tears started rolling down her face. And you could feel the presence of God so heavy in that room. Didn't see anything, but I could feel something.
She did.
She saw something, and I remember looking at her and tears rolling in her face, and tears started rolling down my face because I could feel that there was a presence beside me. And I would say, I feel safe to say that it was an angelic presence beside me. And it was,
for sure.
And I said, "Oh, how I wish that I could see what you're seeing right now," but, and it wasn't really too long after that she passed away also. And so I would have to say, like you said, there's good and there's evil, and somebody can make something good out of this, or somebody can make something bad out of the whole thing that we've said today.
Yeah.
I guess it's your perspective and where you come from, what you've been around, but we're Christian people. We're Christian people. So, and your grandmother was a godly Christian woman. This lady that I'm talking about was a godly Christian woman. And so I feel like that I was allowed to feel an angel that day. And I feel like that's what your grandmother ended up experiencing. It was some sort of angel. It was in the form of a light. But, we don't know.
Yeah, I would be more likely to say it was something angelic.
Yeah. Especially when her dad said, just saying, even in the first story, her dad saying, "It's not going to hurt you."
Yeah. Yeah, it makes
just
you wonder
pray.
if he had experienced something like that before.
Just pray.
You really, there's no way to say until you experience it for yourself. And if you have discernment, you can know by, I heard somebody say one time that's very spiritually sensitive. She said, don't trust your eyes. Your eyes can play tricks on you. Don't trust your ears because your ears can play tricks on you. Go by what you feel.
Some people would just knock you down about that too.
Well,
but I know that Satan cannot duplicate peace.
No, if you have discernment, if there's something evil, you can feel it.
Yeah.
I know. I can tell you from experience, it's a cold feeling. It's a different type of feeling that you get from anything else.
Mm-hmm.
It's
like that hair standing up on the back of your neck kind of thing when somebody's standing behind you.
Yes, it's almost like a feeling of dread. It's a scary feeling. It's not good at all.
But if And if we're saved and on our way to heaven, that we've accepted Jesus as our Lord and Savior, then we have nothing to fear. I mean, there's no fear.
Right. But going back to the lights, I was listening to a podcast a while back, and this lady said she was driving somewhere in the country at night, and she came around the curve, and there was this huge light in the road, and she described it as being the size of a Volkswagen. And she said it was sitting right in the road, and she drove through it. She said it was
really?
She said, I couldn't stop in time. She said, I drove through this ball of light. And she said, when I drove through it, all the electronics went haywire in my car.
Really?
And she said after a couple of minutes, everything went back to normal. She said, but right for a couple of minutes, she said, my radio stopped working, my speedometer started going crazy. She said everything, all the electronics in her car went crazy for a few minutes, and then everything was back to normal.
Well, I had never heard that.
And if you look, you can look this up. This is documented. Back in World War II, the fighter pilots had these lights that follow their planes around. They called them Foo Fighters. That's where the rock band Foo Fighters got their name. It's documented.
Really?
They had these lights that would fly right on their wing, and they believed they were angels helping them helping them or guiding them or something. I don't know. But you can look up Foo Fighters in World War II, and you can read all about it. It's really interesting. So this is not something unheard of. A lot of people report seeing these lights, but nobody seems to know exactly what they are.
Wow, yeah.
So that's the story about the lights, and I've been hesitant, about telling that because it's pretty unbelievable, honestly. And like I say, if it had come from anybody other than my grandmother and her being as trustworthy as she is, I don't know that I would have believed it. I would probably be very skeptical of it.
Yeah, but you know her. You knew her.
And she told me twice, and the second time she told me was exactly like the first time, because I remembered this story in great detail. So I believe her story 100%, but I still, to this day, can't figure out what it could have been.
Yeah.
For sure.
I sure don't know.
So if anybody's out there listening, if you've had a similar experience, click on that button that says send us a text message and let us know about it. We'd love to hear from y'all.
Oh, we sure would. We would definitely love to hear.
And please follow and like and rate the show.
Yeah.
That helps us reach more people, helps drive it up in the algorithm.
Yeah, and I just want to be able to hear from Christians
Yes.
that have had some things. I mean, it's like the world expects all these. They're open. It's like they're open to all this demonic stuff.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, Satan duplicates
Right.
the things of God, and I want to hear from Christians that's having supernatural experiences,
Right.
and stop being afraid to be able to tell the story about these things, about what God's doing. I mean, because like I said, Satan duplicates the things of God.
Yeah, it's imitation.
Yeah.
Imitation is the greatest form of flattery.
Maybe
Yeah.
that's what I meant to
Yeah,
say.
he imitates the things of God. But yeah, like you said before, though, there's so many people that when you mention the supernatural, they automatically go to demonic.
Absolutely.
But there's so much about this world that we don't know. And
Yeah.
I've said that many times, that we will never know.
Yeah.
Things we just can't explain. And that stuff intrigues me. I don't know if it should or not. I don't know.
I think it's fine. There was, I think you probably remember a few years ago, I used to really like to watch, there was like this TV, and his name was John Paul Jackson. I mean, he's Christian, and
Yeah.
he talked about mysteries of God. Just
Yeah.
the mysteries that's going on in the world, and mysterious things of the Lord. And you follow after God. I mean, there's some exciting stuff that you're going to experience when you follow Him with everything in you. Your whole heart.
And you know as well as I do, when you follow God with your whole heart, the enemy's going to mess with you.
Oh yeah.
And he'll try to sidetrack you, and I think a lot of things that people see and witness are demonic, and I think they're a distraction.
Yeah, you're right.
I think people see things that are maybe get written off as angelic, but actually are something demonic.
Yeah.
Like people say, oh, we live in this old house, and my grandmother comes. She died 50 years ago, but she comes to visit. And
I would say that would be a familiar spirit.
Absolutely.
So
that is not the way it works.
No, that'd be a demonic familiar spirit is what.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
So
all
you
that
don't want to
stuff,
entertain that kind of stuff.
all that stuff is a distraction. It's kind of like the teenager that starts off watching the demonic shows on TV, and then they get into other things and start playing with the Ouija boards, and next thing you know, they're possessed.
Yeah.
And they're having, it's all fun and games till a demon shows up.
Right.
And I've heard so many stories about that very thing happening.
Right. So we don't want anybody to be mistaken in what we're talking about today. Like I said, we're talking the God side.
Right. There's so much of it nowadays, and I just try my best to stay away from it because
Right.
it's...
But we just want you to be aware that, there are godly people out there that serve the Lord Jesus Christ with everything within them. And, it's okay to be able to say, hey, this is what's going on.
Right.
This is what I saw. This is what I witnessed, because even in the Bible, see if you can help me remember the story, Mark, but even I think it Paul that actually came to the gate, and they actually thought it was his ghost.
Yeah.
Isn't that right? Am I getting that correct?
I think so, yeah.
And so that tells you right there, they were talking like, just like I would be talking to you at the moment, and so that was normal for them. That was a natural thing.
Well, when the disciples saw Jesus walking on the water, they
Right.
said they thought it was a ghost.
Yeah. And so, I think there's a fine line with what we were just saying a minute ago, talking about familiar spirit versus, this.
Right. Yeah.
So, be discernful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Pray, seek the Lord's face, ask the Lord, ask Him to confirm to you. Is this of you? The Bible tells you to test the spirits, right?
Yeah, and not have anything to do with darkness.
Absolutely not.
Because it'll lead you down a path you don't want to go down.
Right.
It'll get its hooks in you, and it'll take you down a path that you have a hard time coming back from.
Right, for sure.
Well, folks, I think that's about all we've got today. Like I said, if you or anybody has a story that lines up with what we talked about today, send us a text message and let us know what you think.
Yeah, because, there's in the past when we've been out singing and stuff, I think we may have talked about this on another podcast a little bit, but people would come to us after we maybe would do a service.
Yeah.
And they would want to share something with us, and that they didn't feel comfortable talking to anybody else, but for some reason they would come and talk to us, and we would not have talked about any of this
right
during the service or anything. So why did God bring them to us? Why did they come to us? That we would be able to, we've had some things that's gone on in our life, and so we were able to pray with them, talk to them, and so God, puts people out there. So let us know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I also wanted to say before we close out, if you listen to our podcast, please rate the show and review it. If there's a like button on your podcast player, hit that like button. We're trying to reach people. We just want to be an encouragement to people. We want to uplift people. We're not doing this for money. This, matter of fact, it's costing us money to do it.
Yeah.
There's no money in this until we're not Joe Rogan. We're not making millions of dollars like Joe Rogan does. We actually pay to do this, and we would like to, at least get our money's worth by having listeners. So if you hear us and you like us, rate and review the show, share it with your friends, tell your friends about it. We would really appreciate it, because all of that interaction moves us higher up in the algorithm. I don't know exactly how that works. Somebody with more sense than me is going to have to explain that, but it does help us out, and we would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, we're excited about learning a little bit more and being able to have some guests on the show before too long, hopefully.
Yeah, I've got several people that want to be guests. We've got a friend that's actually a John Maxwell life coach, one of the wisest people I know. And if he's listening, don't get the big head, Chuck.
Yeah, he'll get the big head if he hears that now.
But we would love to have him on, and I think we're going to do that as soon as we get set up for that. But until next time, guys, y'all have a great week. God bless y'all. And you got anything else to say, Teresa?
Just blessings to y'all. Have a wonderful week and be listening, and we'll catch y'all around.
Thank y'all for joining us on Tell Me That Story, and we'll see you next time. God bless.
Bye-bye.